What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics. Today we got a reaction to Steve Taylor and his debut major album at least, Meltdown, brought to us by friend, longtime supporter, and patron of the channel, Robert. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate you. Appreciate all the patrons who make this thing go. If you'd like to support us in any way, check out that Patreon link below or the Patreon link on the end screen. We could not do it without the patrons. All right, I had never heard of Steve Taylor, which kind of surprises me because he's in the contemporary Christian music scene, but he definitely is kind of more accomplished in the arts of doing a lot of other stuff as well. But I'll give you a little background on him and tell you why I'm really excited to do this. I did a ton of research on him, but don't worry, I abridged it for you. He's an American singer, songwriter, record producer, music executive, filmmaker, assistant professor, and actor. A figure in what has come to be known as Christian alternative rock. He enjoyed a successful solo career during the 1980s and also served in the short-lived group Chagall Guevara. I don't know if I'm saying the first part right, but hey. In contrast to many Christian musical artists, his songs have often taken aim at Christian hypocrisy or error with the use of satirical, sardonic lyrics. In 1997, he founded the record label Squint Entertainment, which fueled the careers of artists such as Sixpence None the Richer, Chevelle, and Burlap to Cashmere. I know the first two, and I'll talk more about one of them in a minute. Despite this success, Taylor was ousted from the label by its parent, Word Entertainment, in 2001. He has produced and written for numerous musical acts, one of the most consistent being Newsboys. As a filmmaker, Taylor co-wrote, directed, and produced the feature films Down Under the Big Top, The Second Chance, and Blue Like Jazz. After a decade and a half of hiatus, he returned to performing music in 2010 as the frontman for Steve Taylor and the Perfect Foil, a supergroup he founded with Peter Fuller, Jimmy Abegg, and John Mark Painter. Along with a university residency and continued filmmaking, he would resume work on unfinished Chagall Guevara material into the 2020s. So now we'll rewind it a little bit. In 1985, he received his first Grammy nomination in the Best Male Gospel Performance category, while also being nominated for Dove Awards, which is the CCM Music Awards, right? Contemporary Christian Music Awards, as Gospel Artist of the Year, and for this album, Meltdown, as the Best Contemporary Album of the Year. In the years following those releases, he released some other albums, and then he focused his efforts on running Squint Entertainment and producing projects, I talked about this earlier, but such as Sixpence None the Richer's self-titled 1997 release that featured the hit singles Kiss Me. So if you were alive and listening to music in 97, you're going to know that song. If it doesn't sound familiar, go play a snippet of it on Spotify. You'll know it. And a cover of The Wild's There She Goes, which is a really good song. He would be most noted for his work with Newsboys, who were massive in the CCM world, co-producing 5 of the band's albums while making contributions to their songwriting. During this time, he also directed and produced the Newsboys' 1996 movie Down Under the Big Top, in which the band stars. He began working as a full-time filmmaker, directing music videos for Fleming and John, Rich Mullins, Sixpence None the Richer, Newsboys, Guardian, Twyla Paris, Dakota Motor Company, Out of the Gray, and 2 video albums for himself. Along with new music making, he also had the honor of becoming filmmaker in resident at Lipscomb University's Cinematic Arts program. His roles would include assistant professor of film and creative media and director of the School of Theater and Cinematic Arts. So I tell you all that to say, this guy has a crazy background, just rich with talent and creativity. So this album is his second release and first full-length album, recorded at Sunberg Studios in Denver. It followed 1983's I Want to Be a Clone EP, and some of it came from some of the demos from that as well. It featured a similar kind of style involving Christian rock incorporating new wave influences while also being produced by Jonathan David Brown. The album did well commercially, reaching the number 10 spot on Billboard's top contemporary Christian chart. It additionally received positive critical reviews from publications such as Billboard, saying that, quote, Taylor has an edge and vitality. The album was listed at number 18 in the 2001 book CCM Presents the 100 Greatest Albums in Christian Music. So if you've never listened before, the music will not be in the video, but it's going to be at a Vimeo link below. So let's jump into this. We're going to jump in from the title track, Meltdown, and then in parentheses, at Madame Tussauds. It alludes, of course, to the famous attraction in London, England of Madame Tussauds Wax Museum. But this is what I found interesting. The video was played on MTV, which was unusual for a Christian artist at the time. I would say it was probably never done. The video featured an appearance by actress Lisa Welcher, who is famous from The Facts of Life. Once again, you got to be old like me for those things to mean anything. So I'm going to have the lyrics up as always. Now, before we get into this, I do have to give you a few things just so you kind of know my perspective coming at this. I was a pastor for a few years, led a men's ministry for 10 years on my own. meeting every week, teaching the Bible. So it's been about a decade since I've been a, quote, pastor. And I only did it for a few years, and I had to get out of it, and I'll tell you why. This is not true for everywhere. But when I saw that what he attacks here, and he attacks Christian hypocrisy, that's kind of my MO here. Like, I believe in the Bible wholeheartedly. I believe in Jesus. I am like as strong in my faith as I've ever been, or pretty close. And I don't go to church. I haven't been to church in going on 5 years. I live in a place where it's all about how big is your building and how many people can you get to come. I'm not saying there's not good churches where I live. I just haven't found one that I believe really teaches the Bible and is only worried about that. I see all the manipulation because I've been behind the scenes. I never did it, but I saw it, and I know all the guys around this area. So the manipulation of people, and it's the Christian hypocrisy it's tough for me, and I will call it out. So I'm looking forward to hearing this. I do have a Christian playlist below that another one of our patrons, Scott, has brought several lists that are fantastic. But he's never brought Steve Taylor, and this may not be quite his genre. It sounds like this is going to be my genre. So, all right, enough of me talking, but I kind of thought you needed to know where I'm coming from on this. Let's go. Okay, so I'll give you a little behind the scenes. I've listened to the first minute 19 of that song, and I'm like, why don't I just watch the video? I found the video. It doesn't look like it's going to be high quality, but I mean, we were just going to listen to it anyway. So let's watch the video for this one. All right, Meltdown at Madame Tussauds. I mean, this is a 1984 video, right? And Lisa Welch was the news person. And I read that they shot this in Denver, and her and Steve did this youth rally event, Christian event that weekend. So that's how she ended up being in this video. But it was a 1984 video. Like, this is how all the videos were done. It actually must have had a decently high budget, because the wax figures are melting, and then you're going to be singing, and then you're going to be singing on stage, and then towards the end it's going to cut, and you're going to have a big crowd there. Right? It followed the formula, man. I love it. It takes me back. I think there's going to be a lot of synthesizer and keyboards in this. It's recorded 83, 84. I mean, that's what the music was, boys and girls. So if you don't like that sound and thinks it's dated, you're probably at the wrong place. I can't tell you. I haven't heard the album, but I think it was really good. It was very catchy. And, you got to read between the lines, but I think the line, Meltdown at Madame Tussauds, I think just because you're rich and famous doesn't mean that you're going to heaven. Because you have success here on earth does not mean success in heaven. Oftentimes it's opposite the case. Mark 8:36 says, "For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" And I think that's what verse is telling you. I thought I heard a ghost say, "Have my hands in my pockets on the judgment day. Nobody told me there's fire in the hole. Had the world by the tail, but I lost my soul." So, I mean, a really good way to start this album. And we'll go from that to a track that caused some controversy back in the day. We Don't Need No Color Code. It's written in protest of the racial discriminatory policies of Bob Jones University, a fundamentalist Christian college. At the time of this song's release, BJU had only begun accepting unmarried black students in the decade previous and still prohibited interracial dating amongst its students, a policy that resulted in the school losing its tax-exempt status in 1976. Bob Jones Sr. often spoke in favor of segregation, once infamously giving a sermon on the subject on Easter morning. They eventually dropped the interracial dating ban in 2000. Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable. And years later, Steve said how proud he was of this song, that, he's glad he stood up for it, and eventually things changed. Okay, there is no reading between the lines on this song. But I got to tell you, Bob Jones University, I mean, they've relaxed some things. They did not let black students in until 1971. And they can throw you out of school for numerous things, alcohol, drugs, but also participating in a public demonstration for a cause the university opposes. They can also terminate their employment of faculty and staff and those things. In 1998, a homosexual alumnus was threatened with arrest if he visited the campus. And for years, male students were required to wear slacks, dress shirts, and ties on campus during the day. It's been loosened, and they're allowed to wear polo shirts or dress shirts on weekdays until 4 o'clock, and are no longer have to wear ties. And it was all the way up in 2018 when they allowed women to wear pants on campus. So, yeah, I mean, if that's your thing, more power to you. That's nothing and absolutely zero to do with the Bible. But hey, so he talks about, he's just calling out Bob Jones at the start. Down in Carolina way with a man named Big BJ. BJ went and got a school founded on Caucasian rule. bumper sticker on his Ford says, honkies if you love the Lord. You know, a term for white people, not honk. And then chorus, we don't need no color code. Take your rules and hit the road. Judgment day is going down. Better burn your cap and gown. Those fundamentalist rules are not going to get you into heaven. Then he just really goes in. Not that he hasn't already. White men speak with forked tongue like Satan. White supremacists eat their young. Bigotry is on the loose. Ignorance is no excuse. I know Jesus loves that man, even with the Greenville tan. So he's talking about Bob Jones. Even Jesus can love him with what he's doing. And then, of course, marching to Pretoria. Color codes in churches, huh? Following a fascist creed. Whose translation do you read? True believers won't be snowed. We don't need no color code. I mean, that was a fire song. I could see why. I mean, I bet people were, some people would get irate right now, but back then, 40 years ago, I could just see that they were probably going nuts. And the people at Bob Jones University was probably really going nuts. And I'm glad that I could shine some light on their fine university all the way here in 2024. Next up, we have Am I in Sync? Am I in Sync? I like the way that they were talking inside studio chatter, and did it in the last song as well, just at the very start. This one is intermixed throughout at the start, towards the end, and at the very end. A little shout out to Bowie. Here's he's going to do this in his next album, which he had just come off Let's Dance in '83. So, yes, I know a lot about 80s music. It's worthless knowledge, but hey, maybe it's not worthless here at RTTC at least, right? A really good song that talks about selling your soul for success here on earth and not being in sync. I think it's about walking with Christ, right? And he kind of talks about in the opening verse, what's her name? Is her name Jessica? Yeah, Jessie. Jessie never got her Hollywood role, but talking about all this stuff. And when the chorus comes in, immortality is what I'm buying, but I'd rather be immortal by not dying, which is something that Woody Allen said at one time. Laboratory rats made Roger Fink. There's all these little plays on words, right? Not in a corny way, but in an intelligent way. And the laws of science drove him to drink. And so a lot of synth. This sounded definitely, the last song didn't have nearly as much synthesizer in it, right? The first song did, and this one had a lot. This one definitely for the first half of the song sounded like a traditional new wave song. It's exactly what it sounded like. Not just synths, but the way they were using the synths and the way that Steve's delivering the line. So it's new wave, man. It's 1984, where new wave is still big. It's starting to go out, but it's still big. Next up, we got Meet the Press. Not like the United States TV show MEET. We're not going for a meeting, but meat like the meat that you eat. Meet the Press. Okay, Meet the Press. So it definitely was going at Meet the Press and the media. Now listen, I just got to say this is 1984. Look, the media is totally different than it is now. We have factors in play now in the country I live in the United States, going after the media for the last, 8 years now. It's a different kind of fight. I'll just say that. It's not the same thing as he was talking about way back then. But I think just the last verse tells you everything. When the godless chair of the judgment seat, because back then media controlled everything. And the fact that, your only source of information, there was no internet. So your only source of information is newspapers, magazines. Your local nightly news was huge. And then the major networks, and CNN was in play then. I think it started maybe in 81, 82. But it's really just your national news from ABC, CBS, and NBC, and a little PBS in there as well. So those people had great power because they controlled the dissemination of information. That doesn't exist anymore, obviously, because, social media and everything else, you can get out information however you want. But the problem with that is you can really get out some disinformation as well. But they were doing it at the time then, too. But it's not the same thing as we're thinking about now. But when the godless chair of the judgment seat, we can thank the godless media elite. They can silence those who fall from their grace with a note that says, we haven't the space. Well, look here, the dog's asleep whenever we march or say a peep. A Christian can't get equal time unless he's a loony committing a crime. Listen up if you've got ears, some more biblical allusions. I'm tired of condescending sneers. I've got a dog who smells a fight, and he still believes in wrong and right. So, Steve is absolutely bringing these lyrics. As I'm going to guess he's going to do here with a title like Over My Dead Body. All right, Over My Dead Body. Steve's not writing light songs here on content. I'm not going to go into a whole history of Poland and what happened there in the early 80s, led by a guy named Lech Walesa. I was a news freak. My mom was a news freak, so I knew a lot about history, and I became a history teacher for a little while when I got out of college. But the Russians, it's what the first verse. After the Nazis were baited by the Russian bear, our liberators wanted Poland for a thoroughfare. I was a victim of December 1981. I took a final beating from the blunt end of a Russian gun. Now, the Russians didn't intervene in this conflict that was going on in Poland. But they were going to, but a lot of stuff has surfaced that they weren't that close to doing it. But the Polish government had the Russian arms and stuff, and that's what they're talking about, because Russia basically had control over Poland, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, and Czechoslovakia and East Germany were thinking about intervening. So it's talking about that. You plant your missiles while people wait in line for bread. There's a food shortage. You hang an army tank above us by a bloody thread. You bought our government. They crawl like bleeding sheep to you. We know from history that human life is cheap to you. And then over my dead body, that chorus. A really well done song that doesn't have nearly as many synthesizers. This one has more of a bass line that drives it, which is good because it kind of has a menacing message to it, right? And so that doesn't always fit great with the synthesizer. So I thought it was a really wise choice on arrangement. And this one finishes out the traditional side one. So now we go to side two, Sin for a Season. It's a reference to Hebrews 11:25. Sin for a Season. Another fire song, man. 3 verses. First verse, guy's cheating on his wife. One night, he's at a hotel, so he's on a business trip. She comes up to his room, so he cheats on his wife. 7 months later, he's in the counselor's office with his wife getting marriage counseling, but he said, this is going to be forgiven or whatever, but why can I still not look her in the eye? And the second verse goes, and the woman's shaky signing the check, I think. And the hostess with the check, signing it. She goes out in her car if she can find it. She drives home, but she didn't see the boy and his dad driving home from their first game. They didn't make it far. So she's drinking and driving, kills this kid. She sees the body of an only child lying there, which makes it even worse. Not that it could be worse. There's degrees of worse in that. And then the last verse, it's about somebody asking for, repenting of sin, but then continuing to commit it. Wealthy lips say, keep us from the evil one, while praying hands pray with deliberate cunning. On the carcass of the cold, going to get the Lord to forgive a little sin, get the slate clean so he can dirty it again. So he's repenting, but he has no intention of not doing it again. And no one else will ever know, but he reaps his harvest as his heart grows hard. No man's going to make a mockery of God. I'm only human, got no other reason, sin for a season. So I guess that's just someone trying to repent of their sin, but not really meaning it. At first I took it as maybe an evangelist, but I think it's probably more just someone repenting of their sin without really meaning it. But if we want to talk about evangelists, go to the next song, Guilty by Association, which condemns evangelists that abuse Christian teachings and just seek fame and money for themselves. This was going on in 1984. It sure as heck's going on in 2024. I found in my research, it includes a jab with an impression in the middle 8 at televangelist Jimmy Swaggart, who I don't know if he was the biggest back then. He had to be right there. He had to be right there with the biggest. And Jimmy had some problems. The song on the Fritz, the title track from Steve's next album, was also targeted at Swaggart. So it had a big enough impression on Swaggart that he later struck back by devoting part of a chapter of his book, Religious Rock and Roll, A Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. Oh, so evil. To Taylor, whom he saw as playing evil rock music. Don't even get me started on that. Guilty by Association. I already know by now, this man is pulling no punches. I'll tell you something interesting too in the start. The guitar work in the start, it sounds very much like Footloose, like the song Footloose, the title track from the movie in 84, 85, Kenny Loggins. This would have been written before then. I don't have the technology to do it here on this computer, but if I could just isolate the guitar track, because then horns come in and stuff and it doesn't sound like it, but that riff is still there. If you listen to that guitar riff and I could pull it out and you could just hear that, and I set it side by side with just a guitar riff of Footloose, it's remarkably similar, like remarkably. I'm not saying they ripped it off. I'm just saying it's crazy how close it is. Anyway, so the whole thing is just about how you're misled by televangelists, but you can be misled by your pastor at your church too, who's chasing the riches as well. Guilty by Association. Towards the middle, I could read you the whole song because it's so good, but turn the radio on to a down-home drawl, that southern drawl, because, just a good old boy. He's not trying to do anything to you. He's just real people, as they say. Here, a Brill Cream prophet with a message for y'all. Brill Cream was very popular in the 70s and 80s to slick your hair back. It might have been even before then. I don't know. I have found a new utensil in the devil's toolbox, and the heads are going to roll if Jesus rocks. Talking about Swagger, they're all talking about the evils of rock music. It's a worldly design. God's music should be divine. Try buying records like mine. Avoid temptation. Guilty by Association. And then he does a little thing where he is Swagger there talking about the still small voice. And then I like the very last verse. he likes to finish with verses that really, really come at him. It's a telethon Tuesday for the Gospel Club. Send your money in now. They're going to pull the plug. They'd always pulled out, right? We don't hurry up and get money here. We're going to have to go off the air. We're going to have to fold. We need your help. Just remember this fact when they plead and beg. You could be smelling a crook. You should be checking the book, but you'd rather listen than look. The implication, guilty by association. And I became a Christian when I was 29. And I did a lot of listening and not a lot of reading of the Bible for a lot of years. And once I really started digging into the Bible and going, oh, wait a minute, this has been taught to me incorrectly because that's not what the word says. So that's what he's saying, man. If you're going to follow their teachings, you have the responsibility to know the Bible. God doesn't tell you to get it third hand, right? Second hand, third hand, as it just goes down the line. He doesn't tell you that. So you got to know what it means. So if you go, oh, I didn't know God, I mean, that's what I was taught. Guilty by association, because you should be checking the book, but you'd rather listen than look. Laziness. We got 3 songs left. We got Hero. Hero, a fantastic song. It goes through what many of us experienced. When Steve was growing up, he had all these heroes. Going to be sports heroes. That's about Marvel Comics, so superhero, all these things, and he wanted to be this person. And so then his heroes in real life, saw their marriages fail and all these moral failings and all these things because we're humans, right? It's like guilty by association. It's like sin for a season. Like we're going to sin, we're going to fall. We're not perfect. If we were, Jesus would have never had to come and die on the cross. So he's saying that he has learned, and now I think he might be talking to his child. I might be reading this in that he wants to be that child's hero and realizes that being a hero isn't doing these great, quote, heroic things. It's following the word of God. Because he said, when the house fell asleep, from a book I was led to a light that I never knew. I want to be your hero. And he spoke to my heart from the moment I prayed, here's a pattern I made for you. I want to be your hero. So it might be Jesus talking to him, saying, I need to be your hero, is probably what he's getting at there when I was kind of reading into it, that he was talking maybe to his child, but it's probably Jesus talking to him there. But a really well done song. I like the arrangement of it as well. I thought it was a really crisp arrangement that powered it along. It was probably Cactus Moser. That's the name of the drummer on this album, but it sounded like a drum machine just on this one. I hadn't heard it on others, and we were using a lot of drum machines back in the 80s. Prince recorded most of his albums in the 80s with drum machines, but I digress, but really well done. 2 songs left. We got Jenny. Wow. I was wondering where this song was going. I wonder no more. And I mentioned this earlier. His last verses always pack the most punch. And Jenny's story definitely does. It starts out like anyone, whether it's a guy or a girl living in a small town. You know, she was raised the right way, Sunday school, did all these things. She goes to the carnival that came to town every fall. And one of the guys that works at the carnival tells her, you know, he wants to be with her, steals a kiss from her, and tells her wait for him the next day. He's going to take her away. That people don't, you know, people who know God, they start dying the day they become born again. It's no fun. So she goes off with this guy. She's a stowaway in one of the train cars, which is how they traveled a lot of the times. And we get on a train stowaway, Jesus loves you still and your mama wants you home. But oh, bridges burn when you carry your shame and you think you can't return. So he's setting the table. And we get that chorus, oh, how I want to bury you and run away, done away, how I want to bury your memory. So this guy's trying to get her to go away from her values. And she feels guilty now about things that she's done. And she feels like that sin, like she's failed God and failed those that she loves. And so she can never get away from it. So she doesn't see a way out. And those are lies of the enemy. The devil tells them throughout the Bible. And we're warned of this. There's no sin that you can't come back from. There's only one, and that's not recognizing the Holy Spirit and Jesus as the Son of God. But that's a whole nother discussion. But he convinced her of this. And in this last verse, man, when they finally found her body on a cold dog day, it was in a cattle car buried in the hay. A note in the pocket of her calico dress said, I'm guilty of sin, but I can't confess. That's shame, right? Once you know the truth, you can hide it on a shelf, but unless you bring it down, you can't live with yourself. In her right hand, Jenny held the Bible of her mother. Jenny had a pistol in the other. Now, of course, the camera's going to reverse that, but this is my right hand. And then it takes all the music away. It just comes in with a little light instrumentation. And then on a Saturday night, all the girls run free singing, Bury Me Not on the Lone Prairie. But where do you go when you finish brokenhearted? Back to the dust where you started. So all kinds of biblical allusions, and it kind of starts the song with that line as well. So whew, it's a heavy song, man. he sounded a little Dire Straits or a little Mark Knopfler. I would have noticed we got one song left, so I really don't want to get into it too much because I'll cover it at the end. But Steve really can sing in different styles. It's pretty impressive. We're going to finish this off with Baby Doe. My research told me it was written as a response to the early 1980s incidents involving the deaths of handicapped newborns that resulted from the withholding of medical treatment. The lyrics go beyond specific criticism to the individuals directly involved in those cases to condemning societal indifference and callousness in general, having lyrics about how, quote, lawyers are bought and the presses have run. Steve later remarked, I don't like the idea of me just pointing the finger. In the song Baby Doe, I was just as much to blame as the parents because I wasn't doing anything about it. I kind of told you what the song's about. Usually we wait till afterwards, but just kind of wanted you to know that going into it, where his perspective was at this time. All right, Baby Doe. Another really smart arrangement choice here because the song is so heavy in content matter. We just had light synthesizer, not new wave synth, just a very light treatment of arrangement behind Steve singing the lyrics. I mean, he's taking responsibility here too. I bear the blame, believers are few, and what am I to do? I share the shame, the cradle's below, and where is Baby Doe? Where would end? Oh, no, no, no. It's really a fire song. It's really a fire song and a fantastic way to end this album out. Now we're going to get to my favorite tracks, and there is a ton. There's 10 songs on here, and 8 of them appear as faves or honorable mentions, and really I could have had the other 2, but I'm like, I need to try to eliminate some. So honorable mentions, the title track, Meltdown at Madame Tussauds, where we watched that fun video, Over My Dead Body, Guilty by Association, and Hero. My faves are going to be We Don't Need No Color Code, Am I in Sync, Sin for a Season, and Jenny. Now we'll go to my overall score. Look, the writing on this album is just at another level. I haven't heard a ton of Christian albums start to finish besides by worship bands and stuff. But this is the best Christian album I've ever heard, bar none, not even close. And this is just a great, great album. Not a great Christian album. This is just a great album. His lyrics are phenomenal. The arrangement is great. The arrangement choices. To me, it doesn't sound dated. Now, if you listen to this and you weren't alive in the 80s or listen to music, maybe you think it sounds dated. I actually don't think it sounds dated. Even though he used what was popular at the time, he didn't go overboard, right? I mean, there's a little bit of new wave stuff, like Am I in Sync was the most new wave song on here. I still thought it sounded really well, and he only kind of held it at the first half of it, but he changed stuff up. Some songs were guitar driven, some were bass driven, so they weren't all synth driven by any means. A lot of them just had a variety of instrumentation driving it, but the writing is just fantastic, and I can see why there's a great many people who didn't like him. Maybe that's why Steve never hit it big, but obviously he's an incredibly talented guy. But I say all that to say, I mean, this album is, I'm trying to decide, like, I very, very, very rarely, I'm a very tough grader. If you're not, that's fine. It's just whatever you are, you have to stay at, because everything you grade is to your scale. So you can't start grading higher if you don't normally grade higher or lower. So I got to stay to that scale. And with that, I'm still going to be at the vaunted. Like, it's very hard to get a 9 from me. It's very, very, very hard. I'm going to give this album a 9.0. There are no weak tracks. There are no weak writing jobs. There are no weak arrangements. And I mentioned it earlier. I mentioned it after Jenny, but Steve can sing in a variety of ways. Sometimes he's trying to sing new wave. That last song, he just sang it straight up. Like, it's so, so good. So let me know what you think of this album down below. What else should I check out from Steve? And most of all, give a shout out to Robert. Thank you, Robert, for bringing this one. I super appreciate it. And until next time, guys, I'll see you.